Good morning, everyone. We are continuing with our course that is BPSC 145 Democracy and Development in Northeast India. So we are continuing. We started our this paper in our last lecture. We are continuing with this, and to start with, let's talk about the map, which is very important for all the students to know the capital and the states that belongs to this northeastern part of our country. So you can see all the states here, starting from Arunachal Pradesh. Its capital is Itanagar. Then comes Nagaland, Kohima. Manipur's capital is Imphal. Mizoram's capital is Aizawl. Tripura's capital is Agartala. Meghalaya's capital is Shillong. Assam's capital is Dispur, and Sikkim's capital is Gangtok. So this map is very essential for all of you to know, because this map is we are talking about all the things which happened in history around this region. So this map is for your reference to know whether which state falls and which state shares border with which state. So let's start with Unit 3, that is economic profile of the region. We will be talking about the economic profile of the northeastern region, particularly in our this chapter, where we will be knowing how the economy of this area is developing. So let's start with the introduction. The economic profiles of the state of Northeast India impact the politics and development of the region. So economy is very important for any country, any state to run themselves. So it is very important to see what are the economic profiles and how it is impacting the politics, and how it is helping the development of this region. So economy is also affected or impacted by the geographic location and the topography which shapes them. There are 8 states in the northeast India, and they have 2 types of terrains. This is very important to know, because geographical location also ensures how much the economy will be flourishing in a state or a country, and how much it is going to affect them. So, the northeastern part of our country, which is having 8 states, have 2 types of terrains. First is plains, and the other one is hills. So, it is it is full of hills and plains. The land, service sector, traditional industry, natural resources such as forest, mineral, petrol, coal, limestone, etc., and tourism are important sectors of the economy of the region. So it is very important to understand that not only this land is about plains and hills, it is also having a vast area of land. There are many natural resources. You can find forests, minerals, petrol, coal, all these things are available there. And also tourism plays a very important part, and it is developing and boosting the economy of the region. Among these lands, the land has a special significance. So there is also special significance attached to this land. According to Amalindu Guha, who wrote in 1977 that all other inputs into Assam were brought from outside except land. So we will be talking about all this economic profile of this Northeast India region in this unit, with reference to different sectors such as the land, plantation, minerals, tertiary sector, challenges, and migration. So we will be talking about all these things in our today's lecture. Let's start with land and plantation. The land is the source of agriculture, plantation, and natural resources. The nature of cultivation in land is different in plains and hill regions. So it is very important to understand that in hill regions, the cultivation will be different from what you can find in the plains region. So the proportion of plain areas in Assam is more significant than those in other northeast states. So Assam plays a very important role here. In the hilly areas, we can see that there is jhum cultivation which is practiced, which has been the traditional mode of cultivation. So they used to slash the crop and burn them, and they just move to another place, and then again they start with their agricultural activities. So this is very popular in the hilly areas, that is known as jhum cultivation. Also, there is no individual ownership of agricultural land in the hill areas of the north. So no one can say that the hill areas land is their own and their private property. They can't say that. And also because it is lies with the community. So there is a community bonding which together owns a land. The ownership lies with the community only and not any individual. However, in plain areas of the region, both inhabited by the tribals and non-tribals, there are individually transferable and inheritably rights inland in like other parts of India. So there is also something which you should keep in your mind, that the area which belongs to northeastern region, it comprises of both non-tribals and the tribal population, and that also shapes the economy, shapes the politics of that country, of that part of our country, and it is impacting it very much. So tribals and non-tribals population also plays a very important role in this part of our country. Let's talk about the tribal areas first. So in the tribal areas, allotment of land for the purpose of cultivation to an individual is made by the village community through the gaon buda or village head. So in the tribal areas who live in that northeastern part of our country, if someone is getting the, for cultivation, if someone is getting a land or allotted a land, and it is an individual, so it will be decided by the village community. Gaon buda is the particular word that is used there, which means village head. So he works on behalf of the community. The village head works on behalf of the community, and he will allot that land according to the traditional customs. So there are particular customs belonging to a particular tribe. So they will be following those traditional customs while allotting the land to an individual. Violation of the procedure by the individual allottee can lead to dispossession of the land. So there is also there is also a procedure through which, if an individual who is allotted a land is misusing and violating the principles and violating the rules and regulation, he or she will be dispossessed of his or her land. So the relationship between land and migrant peasants has been an important issue in the political economy in Northeast India, especially Assam. Also, you have to remember that there is also a concern of migration from East Bengal earlier, and there is also important feature of the land-based economy of the state. So the migration of peasants from the east began in 1891. So we are talking about pre-independence time, and the encouragement of the British to cultivate wastelands in Assam. So during the colonial period, some things were happening on the insistence of the Britishers, and from migrants were also, migrating from the east. The wastelands, what wastelands they are talking about? The wastelands were those types of land that forest and other common property resources the British called wastelands under the colonial individual ownership. So this is how the colonial terms have been used. Till the 1930s, the land was in abundance in Assam. So there were many lands you can find in Assam. But after 1930s, the situation changed gradually. The growth of plantation economy from the first half of the 19th century affected food production adversely in the province. So there was very, a time has come when there was a food deficit in the region. In such a situation, cultivation in the land was carried out by the migrants from neighboring districts in East Bengal. In the 1940s, still we are talking about the pre-independence time. In the 1940s, the demographic structure of Assam changed, with the number of migrant peasants becoming more than that of the local peasants. So the issue arises that the number of people who are inhabitant of Assam are less in number than the migrants who are coming from the eastern part of the state. In reaction, Congress leader Gopinath Bardoloi introduced line system. So he introduced with the line system. What is line system? So it is demarcated land which is occupied by the migrant peasants to prevent them from occupying land beyond the land system. So this is how the Congress leader Gopinath Bordoloi introduced the line system. The plantation economy is also related to the question of land in Northeast India. So the closure of tea trade with China foreclosed the avenues of availability of tea for England. So tea is also a very big, issue and very big thing that colonial government focused on. and the British looked for alternative sources of tea. So, tea was very important for Britishers, and that is why India is also important for them, because India's geographical location allows the tea plants to grow properly and very beautifully. So, the British planters invested money to capture land for tea plantation in Assam. So, they started, looking for alternative for tea plantation, and they found Assam. So, they invested money there. Plantation economy introduced monetization of Assam's economy, and it led to improvement in means of cultivation in agriculture. Indeed, the bullock cart was introduced for the first time. So, this was the time when bullock cart was first introduced. The British encouraged tea plantation workers from other parts of India also, not only from Assam. They were encouraging plantation workers from Bihar, UP, Rajasthan to work on these tea plantations, as they encouraged the peasants from East Bengal to cultivate land in Assam. So this is how the flock of people were, started residing in Assam. Now let's talk about the extraction economy. Apart from agriculture and plantation, land in Northeast India is also a source of extraction of natural resources, forest products such as timber, petroleum, and coal. Although attempts to extract natural resources in the states have been made since 1950s. So as I already discussed, that Northeast India is full of natural resources, and that is why you can find forest products like timber. You can also have you can also see that it is a place where you can find a huge scale of petroleum and coal. Since 1990s, attempts became more persistent to extract natural resources in Assam. The extraction economy in Northeast India was boosted after the introduction of new economic policies, which were extended in the Northeast in the 1990s. During this period, the central government, some state level politicians, contractors, and local business people attempted to extract coal, sandstone, lime, and uranium. They started extracting these natural resources from the northeastern part of our country. Now let's talk about the dominance of the tertiary sector. So there is also a limited scope for the development of agriculture and industry due to topography of the region. As we already discussed, that the topography of Northeast India is divided into two parts. First is you can find plains, and the other you can find hills. So in such a situation, the development of the service sector is more viable in the Northeast. The service sector, known as tertiary sector, which you can like you will be very curious to know what comes under this tertiary sector. So tertiary sector comprises of banking, insurance, transport, communication, public administration, health, education, sanitations, etc. It this dominates the economy in the northeast. And indeed, the tertiary sector has grown faster in the northeastern than other sectors. So this sector is more advanced as compared to other sectors in economy of northeastern part of our country. Now let's talk about the emergence of social classes. There are different communities in the northeast had their traditional hierarchy intertwined in social and economic relations. So northeast is a place where you can find n number of communities living together, and because there is also, as I already discussed, that the population is divided between non-tribals and tribals, so you can find n number of communities living there peacefully together. So traditional social and economic relations have been impacted since the British period. So there were hierarchies in these communities, and they are very traditional in nature, but these traditional social and economic relations were impacted since the British came into India and settled here. The reason for the rise of new social classes in the Northeast are, so there are few reasons for the new social classes which emerged in Northeast. The first is migration from East Bengal and other parts of the country. Secondly, the expansion of educational and other institutions. Thirdly, demographic changes within the communities. State policies in the post independence period, including the tension of the economic reforms of the 1990s. So, these are the reasons why new social classes emerged in Northeast India. The impact of these factors has not been equal in all states and communities, nor have they seen the even level of rising of new social classes. So, social classes are not exclusively social or economic groups, their economic and social characteristics are embedded. So, this is uh, about the emergence of the social class. So, these classes can be identified as entrepreneurs, business persons, traders, middle classes, for example, salaried class. There is also youth and elite. Elite who have education, economic assets, political power, and along with them peasants, etc. So the growth of these classes began during the colonial period with the encouragement of the colonial authorities to carry out various economic activities, and it continued in the contemporary period. So you can find the growth of new social classes, especially the middle class, which comprises of teachers, lawyers, government employees in Northeast, and it took place more in the cities than in the villages. So, since urbanization is not a dominant feature in the region, the more articulate classes are concentrated in the cities. So, the class differentials among tribals have emerged across states in the Northeast India. So let's talk about the challenges which this northeastern part is facing. The economies in the northeast faces challenges, that is poverty, unemployment, backwardness, anxiety, and social unrest. So these are the problems. These are the challenges that these northeastern states are facing, and northeast India also lacks adequate development of infrastructure. So there is also underdevelopment in the infrastructure in northeastern part. Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, and Manipur have a higher hand count of poverty ratio than the national average. So this is a very big concern that Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, and Manipur, they are having a higher hand count of poverty ratio than the national average. Rural poverty is higher in rural areas than in urban areas, and also the principal reason for the increase in poverty ratio in Arunachal Pradesh is the increase in rural poverty. So you can say, however, that there has been some decline in poverty within the states of Northeast India in the first 2 decades of liberalization. So, with the advent of liberalization, you can see there are few changes that occur, but the decline has not been equal across the states. There is a lack of employment opportunities in Northeast, which is also a very big concern for the economy to run properly. The traditional sector does not provide employment. And also, lack of transport and infrastructure has been a perennial problem in Northeast India. So, these are the challenges which the Northeastern part is facing. So let's sum up this chapter, sum up this economic part of whatever we are learning today about the economic profile of the region. So the land, service sector, traditional industries, and natural resources and tourism are important sectors of the economies of Northeast India. So you should know that it is land, service sector, traditional industries, natural resources, and tourism. These things are the that is making capable of the northeastern countries to grow, to develop themselves. Ownership of land in tribal areas of the region lies with the communities, and also the tribal peasants practice jhum cultivation. We have learned about it in our today's lecture in previous slides. So the land is the source of agriculture in northeast. It is also the source of plantation and natural resources. The land question in the Northeast is linked with migration. Migration is also a very big issue there. The migration started during the colonial period and it continues in the contemporary period. One reason for migration into the region was to cultivate the land and engage in plantation activities. So, why these migrants were coming during the colonial period? To engage in the plantation activities. There is also tertiary economy where you can see that banking, insurance, transport, communication, public administration, and other services such as health, education, and sanitation is the dominant sector in the economies of Northeast India. So, over the years, some social groups such as salaried middle class and entrepreneurs have emerged in the region. So, the economies of the states face challenges such as poverty, unemployment, lack of infrastructure, etc., and lack of opportunities in the Northeast forces out migration from the region to other parts of the country. So, not only people are coming in northeastern part for work, but northeastern people who are facing problems because there is a lack of opportunity for them, so they are also coming out of the region. We ended with our chapter 3. Now we will be continuing with our unit 4, that is constituent assembly debates. So how Northeast became a debatable issue in the Constitution Assembly. So to introduce this unit, let's start with Constitution of India, which was adopted on 26th of November 1949. But adoption of Constitution of India means that Constituent Assembly finalized it on that day, but it came into force 2 months later, after its adoption, that is on 26th of January 1950, which is also known as the date of its commencement. So our Constitution of India was came into force in after 2 months of its being adoption. And however, some provisions of it, like related to citizenship, elections, provisional parliament, temporary and transitional provisions, had become operative on 26th of November for 1949 itself. So basic emergency and the needs, the particular needs which were important, so that got operative from that day only, 26th of November 1949. But the other things, the other things that is there in our constitution, that came into force on 26th of January 1950. Assam, which later became Northeast India, was a reference point of debate in the Constituent Assembly of India. It was about creating constitutional devices such as autonomous district councils and autonomous regional councils to protect the rights of the tribal people in the region. As we are discussing that the population of northeast part is full of tribals and also non-tribals. But because there is tribals who are residing in that part of our country, so there are many many policies are being made to protect their rights, to protect them, the tribal people of the region. So now let's talk about the Government of India Acts, that is 1919 and 1935. The Constitution of India embodies provisions providing basic democratic rights of human beings, including those who are not Indian citizens. It embodies provisions for the availability of institutions for legislation, execution, and jurisdictions to fulfill these rights. It presents a vision for social transformation, and also it deepens of democracy in India. So the evolution of this democratic institution and rights had started much before the Constitution Assembly made the Constitution of India. So these democratic institution has already been started even before the Constituent Assembly made the Constitution of India. So, however, it must be underlined that the features of the democratic institutions and values introduced during the colonial period were meant to serve the colonial interest. So that policies, that democratic institutions was not meant to serve the demand of the Indian population, but for the colonial interest. So it is in contrast to the purpose of the provisions of the constitution made by the Constituent Assembly of India. Although the Indian constitution was a result of deliberations of the Constituent Assembly, some of its feature had evolved over three quarters of a century through various acts from 1858 to 1935. Among these acts, the Government of India Act 1919 and the Government of India Act 1935 have special significance regarding Northeast India. So this is the reason why we are learning about these Government of India Acts 1919 and Government of India Acts 1935, because it has some special significance for Northeast India. The British occupied different territories in Northeast India at different times from the third decade of the 19th century. So, in after 1874, they became part of Assam. The Government of India Act 1919 designated those areas as backward tracts, and Government of India Act 1935 re-designated backward tracts as excluded and partially excluded areas. So if someone asks you that from when these areas are known as excluded and partially excluded, you can see that it is mentioned in the Government of India Act 1935, which redesignated the areas which were earlier known as backward tracts according to 1919 Act. Now it will be after the advent of 1935 Government of India Act, it is known as excluded and partially excluded areas. So these were the central points of debate in the Constituent Assembly debates, resulting in the incorporation of the special provisions for Northeast India in the Indian Constitution. Now let's talk about the Constituent Assembly and Northeast India, specifically Assam, Tripura and Manipur. Initially, the colonial authorities resisted the demand for the creation of a Constitution of India. However, the change in the circumstances, that is, for the outbreak of the World War II and the formation of a new coalition, that is, Labour led government in Britain, forced the British government to acknowledge the urgency to solve the problem related to the Constitution of Indians. So, the colonial authorities realized the need to form a constitution for India after the end of their rule in India. So, in this regard, they sent two missions. So, first mission is Cripps mission, which was sent in 1942, and the other one is the Cabinet mission in 1946. The formation of the Constitution Assembly was the final of the process that began with the proposal of these two missions. So, let's talk about the Cripps mission. In 1942, the British government sent its cabinet member, Sir Stafford Cripps, with a draft declaration on proposals to be implemented at the end of World War II if both the Muslim League and the International Congress had agreed to accept them. Cripps' visits with the proposal to India was known as Cripps Mission. The draft proposal of the Cripps Mission recommended the following. I am just counting what were the proposals that Cripps Mission brings with them. The granting dominion status to India, that is an equal partnership of the British Commonwealth of Nations, first. Secondly, the formation of one Indian Union, which would consist of all provinces and Indian states. Thirdly, if any province which was not prepared to accept the constitution was to be free to retain its constitutional position which had existed at that time. Fourthly, formation of constituent assembly consisting of the member partly elected by the provincial assemblies. So both the International Congress and Muslim League did not accept the proposals of the Cripps mission. The Muslim League demanded that India be divided on the communal lines and some provinces form an independent state of Pakistan. There should be two constituent assemblies, one for Pakistan and another for India. Now let's talk about the Cabinet Mission 1946. The British Indian government made several attempts to bridge the differences between Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. However, it was unsuccessful. The British government sent another delegation of the cabinet members, which came to be known as Cabinet Mission Plan. It consisted of three cabinet members. The first is Lord Pethick Lawrence, Sir Stafford Cripps, and Mr. A.V. Alexander. The cabinet delegation also failed to bring the Indian National Congress and Muslim League to an agreement. However, it made its own proposal, which was announced simultaneously on 16th May 1946 in England and India. The cabinet delegation made following recommendations, which we are going to know. The first recommendation is there should be a Union of India consisting of British Indian provinces and the princely states, which would have jurisdictions over subjects of foreign affairs, defense, and communication. Secondly, all residuary powers would belong to the provinces and the states. Thirdly, the union would have executive and legislature consisting of the representatives from the provinces and the states, but for decision relating to a major communal issue in the legislature, a majority of representatives of two major communities would be present and voting along with the majority of all members present, and voting would be required. Last point was the province would be free to form groups with executives and legislatures, and each group would be free to determine the provincial subjects which the group would take up. So these were the recommendations by the Cabinet Mission Plan. Just a second. Now let's talk about the representation of Northeast India in the Constituent Assembly. The indirect election was held according to the provisions of the Cabinet Mission Plan. Among those who represented Assam, present Northeast India, leaders Gopinath Bardoloi, James Joy Mohan Nicholas Roy, who was popularly known as JJM Nicholas Roy, played a decisive role in the Constituent Assembly regarding the making of 6th schedule of the Constitution. Gopinath Bardoloi was a lawyer and a Congress leader from Assam. He was also jailed by the Britishers for participating in the international movement, and he was also awarded the Bharat Ratna posthumously. He also played a leading role in the Constituent Assembly debates and in formulating the 6th schedule of the Constitution. He was a Premier of Assam, its Chief Minister from 11th of February 1946 to 5th of August 1950. James Joy Mohan Nicholas Roy was a Khasi legislator. In 1921, he was elected to the Assam's Governor's Council, and in 1937, he was elected to the Legislative Assembly of Assam Province. He was also elected on a Congress ticket to the Constituent Assembly of India. Like Gopinath Bardoloi, he also played a prominent role in the making of Sixth Schedule. He was also minister in two governments headed by Sadullah in the pre-independence period, and in the post-independence period, he was a minister in the Bardoloi government. In the post-independence period, he supported Hill State movement for the creation of a separate state for the Khasi, Jaintia, and Garo states. Now, let's talk about the committees. The Constituent Assembly divided its work among different committees for its smooth functioning. The committees were the devices formed by the Constituent Assembly to help it in the smooth functioning. So, what were the important committees here? You can find that there is drafting committee whose chairman was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. There is Union Powers Committee, which whose chairman is Jawaharlal Nehru, and this Union Powers Committee was having 15 members. Next comes Union Constitution Committee, which is again headed by Jawaharlal Nehru. Provincial Constitutions Committee's chairman was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and that committee was having 25 members. Next comes the Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities, and Tribal and Excluded Areas, which was headed by Vallabhbhai Patel, which was having 54 members at that time. And then comes the Steering Committee, which was headed by Dr. K.M. Munshi. It had three members, and who were those? Dr. K.M. Munshi, Gopal Swami Iyengar, and Bhagwan Das. These three members were there in the Steering Committee. Now let's talk about the subcommittees. Among these committees, Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities, and Tribal and Excluded Areas was specifically relevant. It is with the reference to these issues of Northeast India, that is about excluded and partially excluded areas, apart from tribal regions other than the Northeast. So, the Cabinet Mission had recommended the constitution of an advisory committee to suggest constitutional mechanisms to protect the interest of the minorities and tribals. Such an advisory committee was supposed to be part of the Constituent Assembly, and its purpose and the purpose of the Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities, and Tribals and Excluded Areas was to advise the Constituent Assembly to formulate policies suitable for the welfare and administration of the tribal and excluded areas. So that committee is particularly for that, so that they can advise the Constituent Assembly about the needs, about the policies required, about the day-to-day happenings of the welfare and administration of the tribals and the excluded areas. The Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities, and Tribal and Excluded Areas consisted of the following subcommittees. So, this advisory committee was also having subcommittees. The first is Fundamental Rights Subcommittee, which was headed by J.B. Kriplani. The other one is the Northeast Frontier Tribal Areas and Assam Excluded and Partially Excluded Areas Subcommittee, which was headed by Gopinath Bardoloi. And this committee was also known as Bardoloi Committee because it is headed by Gopinath Bardoloi. Thirdly, it is the Excluded and Partially Excluded Areas other than those in Assam, that was headed by B.M. Thakkar. Now let's talk about in detail about the Bordoloi Committee. The subcommittee, the Northeast Frontier, Tribal and Excluded Area is also known as Bordoloi Committee, as we have discussed in the previous slide. It is named after its chairman Gopinath Bordoloi. Members of the Bardoloi committee were Gopinath Bardoloi, JJM Nicholas Roy, who was a Khasi leader, BM Rao, who was a civil servant and advisor to the Constituent Assembly, AV Thakkar, a Gandhian, Roopnath Brahma, a plain tribal and an intellectual, and the Mayang Nocha Ao, who was a Naga leader. The Bordoloi committee visited tribal areas of Assam and interacted with the people so that they can get the first hand experience, first hand knowledge from the people and find out the reason for the backwardness of the region. So, this is how Bordoloi committee functioned, because they went to the ground, they tried to find out the root cause from the people who are living the life, and so that they could suggest, they could advise those, issues to the Constituent Assembly for further proceedings. The subcommittee also noted the significance of traditional institutions of the governance and the democratic nature of their functioning, which settled disputes according to local customs. So, this practice was also going on there, which Bordoloi Committee noticed. The subcommittee also noted the sensitivity and reverence of people for their land, forest, lifestyle, traditional justice system, language, distinct culture of the excluded, tribal areas, etc. The Bordoloi Committee underlined the need for special provisions to protect the identity of tribal people from the dominant communities. While the Bordoloi Committee dealt with Assam, Thakkar Committee, that is Committee on Excluded and Partially Excluded Areas, with V.M. Thakkar as its chairman, was about other tribal areas from Assam. So, Assam was dealt by Bordoloi Committee, and other tribal areas apart from Assam was taken care by Thakkar Committee. Sorry. So these committees submitted their reports to the Constitution Drafting Committee. Bordoloi Committee suggested measures for special provisions regarding Assam, and Thakkar Committee about other tribal inhabited areas. So the tribal areas of Assam, which were earlier known as excluded and partially excluded, were redesignated as the scheduled areas. So after the recommendations of the Bordoloi Committee, the parts excluded and partially excluded areas now redesignated as the scheduled areas, while tribal areas in other than the areas of Assam were designated as tribal areas. So scheduled areas and tribal areas. So there is also arguments in the Constituent Assembly that gone very long, and after discussing the reports of various committees, which inter alia included Bardoloi Committee's reports, the Constituent Assembly appointed a drafting committee under the leadership of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on 29th of August 1947. The draft constitution was prepared by B.N. Rao, the advisor to the Constituent Assembly. A 7-member committee was constituted to examine the draft. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was law minister and chairman of the drafting committee, piloted the draft in the assembly. Dr. Ambedkar presented the draft Constitution of India, which was an alternative to the proposals given in the reports of the committees. Besides, it contained additional resolutions. The draft constitution was published in February 1948. It was discussed by the Constituent Assembly clauses by clause and in its several sessions, and was completed by October 17, 1940. This discussion was known as the second reading. The Constitutional Assembly again met on 14th of November 1949 to discuss the draft further, or to give it a third reading. It was finalized on 26th of November 1949 after receiving the signature of the President of the Constituent Assembly. Nevertheless, it was January 26, 1950, which became the date of the commencement of the Constitution, and the recommendation of these committees were placed before the drafting committee also. So, the main recommendation of the Bordoloi Committee was the establishment of Autonomous District Council and Regional Council for the tribal areas within the state of Assam. They were all envisaged in the 6th schedule of the Constitution. So, with this, I end my lecture here today. Thank you.